a friend and I named Jem, who's from Turkey, were having an interesting conversation the other day, and it inspired me to create this video on the growing topic and the discussion. In software development, the temptation to quantify productivity through simple countable metrics like lines of code is strong. From my understanding, corporations already possess tools and models to assign monetary or effort values to code volume. However, decades of industry experience and modern AI advancement show that LOC, lines of code, is a poor proxy for true business value, quality, or productivity. In the rapidly evolving landscape of generative AI, a new metric is emerging. Some organizations, as a proxy for developer productivity, AI token count. Tokens, the fundamental units of text processed by large language models, are being tracked per developer, per ticket, or per project, with the intent of quantifying AI-assisted effort. However, much like lines of code, LOC, relying on token count as a measure of value or productivity is fundamentally flawed and risks repeating past mistakes. This video and the available PDF explain current capabilities, fundamental limitations, behavioral risk, and future trends. I have designed it for business presentations with clear sections, key takeaways, and discussion points, which are suitable for leadership, workshops, or strategy sessions, and I hope you find it beneficial. Enjoy.
Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a topic that's fascinating, but honestly, kind of frustrating. We're going to completely dismantle the enduring myth that lines of code, or LOC, is an effective way to measure software value or developer productivity. If you manage a team, write code, or drive any sort of digital transformation, this is absolutely crucial to master. We're basing today's explainer on a really insightful guide meant for business leaders and engineering managers. So get ready to rethink everything you thought you knew about measuring digital work. Just imagine letters and syntax floating around a monitor like a massive, chaotic cloud. It's the perfect illusion of code volume as productivity. For corporations, counting lines is incredibly tempting. It's technically super easy, right? Just run a script, see how much volume a developer turned out today, and boom, you have a metric. But decades of industry experience absolutely prove that counting volume is a fundamentally flawed proxy for productivity. It only measures the input. It tells us literally nothing about the actual output. To instantly frame just how absurd this metric is, think about this quote from Bill Gates. Measuring software productivity by lines of code is like measuring aircraft progress by weight. Think about that for a second. If you're building an airplane, making it heavier doesn't make it better. Actually, it usually means it's less efficient and a whole lot harder to get off the ground. The exact same logic applies to software. We are constantly battling this central conflict of volume versus value, and that quote hits the nail on the head. We need a massive mindset shift. So how did we get so obsessed with counting lines in the first place? Well, to understand that, we've got to go back to the 1980s. You might remember this if you've been around the block a few times. COCOMO, or the Constructive Cost Model. This was an estimation model that used thousands of lines of code, or KLOC, to forecast project effort, timelines, and budgets. Because KLOC became the standard mathematical input for these massive, expensive legacy projects, volume just got deeply entrenched in corporate budgeting. We basically trained an entire generation of management to equate lines of text with dollars and effort. But the reality of modern coding reveals a totally different picture. Imagine code visually inflating and shrinking right in front of you. Think about 10 elegant lines of code. Those 10 lines represent high value, complex problem solving, and most importantly, really low maintenance costs down the road. Now contrast that with 1,000 lines of boilerplate. That's just low value, verbose code inflation, and it's going to cost an absolute fortune to maintain over the next 5 years. Those 10 elegant lines carry way more actual weight and value for a business than the bloated boilerplate. Yet a line counting metric, it would reward the bloated code 100 times over. No way does that make sense. So why does it fail so badly? Because LOC metrics are totally blind. They completely ignore what we call the invisible engineering work. Think about all the vital stuff that happens behind the scenes. System design, architecture, rigorous debugging, comprehensive testing. code refactoring to make things run smoother, and of course, team collaboration. None of these absolutely vital activities generate massive volumes of code. Honestly, they often result in writing less code. But these are the exact things that drive software quality and long-term maintainability. When you measure by volume, you're essentially ignoring the most important work your engineers are actually doing. Let me share a really powerful anecdote that perfectly captures this. Negative 2000. This is known as the negative productivity paradox. Back in the early days of Apple, the legendary developer Bill Atkinson spent time optimizing a core piece of software. He actually managed to remove 2,000 lines of code while making the whole system run vastly better. Under a volume-based metric, Atkinson's productivity for that week would be negative 2,000. He'd literally be punished by the math for delivering a massive, elegant improvement. It's crazy, right? It just perfectly highlights the perverse incentives we create when we focus on volume. Which brings us right into the modern era. Generative AI is changing everything about how we write software. So we've got to ask, does generative AI solve this productivity measurement puzzle? Does the rapid speed of AI code generation fix our issues, or does it somehow make them worse? Well, the reality is, it makes those old volume metrics downright dangerous. Tracking things like AI-generated lock percentage creates some incredibly perverse incentives. What you end up with is the rapid creation of what we call code slop. Sure, AI can pass syntax checks in its sleep, but it can easily introduce subtle logic errors and security vulnerabilities that humans then have to untangle. You end up accumulating technical debt at machine speed. And here is a super crucial point. Counting the number of AI tokens used on a project or a ticket is a similarly flawed productivity metric. Just like lines of code, measuring the raw volume of tokens processed incentivizes sheer volume over quality and elegance. Token counts are really just the newest, fanciest version of counting lines. So the big takeaway here is this. When generative AI makes creating lines of code or generating thousands of tokens essentially trivial and nearly free, the true value of engineering shifts dramatically. The value doesn't live in the typing anymore. It shifts entirely to human judgment and outcome delivery. The real skill today is in prompt engineering, precise system design, and the rigorous quality assurance needed to ensure that machine-generated code actually solves the business problem safely. Luckily, if we look at the evolutionary journey of how we measure work, the industry is decisively moving away from volume metrics. Back in the 80s, we had the Kokomo era and clock estimation. Then in the 2000s, the agile shift brought us story points and velocity. By the 2010s, we got the elite DORA research focusing on deployment frequency. Now, in the 2020s, AI generation is exposing the severe risks of code slop. And the future, that belongs entirely to outcome platforms that connect directly to actual business KPIs. The trajectory here is pretty undeniable. Now, I know dismantling old metrics can feel a little stressful for organizations, so let's talk about the modern alternatives. We don't have to fly blind here. We can systematically measure performance using modern, multidimensional measurement frameworks. Instead of just fixating on raw volume, we can look at a complete dashboard of team performance. We're talking about measuring functionality, flow, quality, and overall team health. It's about getting a holistic, accurate picture of what an engineering team is truly achieving. Let's break down a few of these outcome-based alternatives. First up, flow and speed. This is where DORA metrics shine, things like lead time and deployment frequency. This is widely considered the gold standard because it actually predicts team performance and system reliability over time. Next is quality, measured by defect density and security findings, which really focuses on sustainable maintainability. And finally, the ultimate metric, business impact. We're talking feature adoption and revenue lift. This ties engineering effort directly to company goals. Because let's face it, if your code doesn't move those needles, the volume of lines or tokens simply does not matter. For all you business leaders
To move
and
beyond simple
engineering
volume
managers
metrics,
watching
follow
this
these steps.
explainer,
Audit your metrics,
here is a
pilot DORA,
concrete,
educate your teams,
immediate
and use
action
Kokomo
plan
for
you
rough
can use
sizing.
right now. Step 1, audit your current metrics and completely eliminate LOC or raw token targets from performance reviews. Just get rid of them. Step 2, pilot outcome dashboards, starting with DORA metrics. Try it with one team first, then scale it up. Step 3, educate your teams. Run workshops on why volume metrics mislead, and maybe use that Bill Atkinson story as a teaching anchor. And step 4, if you absolutely must use models like Kokomo, use them very judiciously, strictly for rough initial project sizing, and never ever for evaluating developer performance. We've covered a lot of ground today, moving from the outdated mindsets of the 1980s all the way to the AI-driven realities of tomorrow. I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. Look at your own organization, look at your dashboards, and ask yourself honestly, are you measuring your teams by the weight of their code, or are you measuring them by the weight of their impact? The answer to that question is absolutely going to determine the true success of your digital transformation. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep focusing on what really matters.